Okay, so this is Photoshop tutorial number 2, I believe. And basically we're just going to go over like texture application and a couple little tricks here and there that might be beneficial in the future. So, okay. So I just have this line work opened up, and I'm gonna show you how it can be fairly easy to apply textures and things like that to something like this, which is kind of what you'll be doing for your high street elevation over top of your hand-drawn line work. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to grab a texture here. Let's say, not with this do stuff. And I'll go with something like this. And I'm going to grab that and drag it over. Okay, so I'm going to shrink this down so that I can tile it a little bit. This is a seamless texture, which basically means I can place it next to itself over and over, and there's not going to be a real obvious line from one texture to the next. However, as you can already see, I'm getting these two stones directly next to each other over and over, and that might be something that I may want to watch out for. And if for whatever reason I get a big huge swatch and I'm seeing that pattern tick over and over again, I may want to address that. And the way I would address that is the same way that if I were going to make another texture. And how about we just go ahead and do that? Let's I just selected all of those, right click and hit merge layers to merge all of those together so that now it's just kind of one big item. Now let's go and see if we can find a stone texture that works. And let's say stone wall. Okay, so options some not be. So that's something to kind of look for. Is, it's obviously seamless, works a little easier, but at the same time you're not always going to have that option. So let's see if we want to go with something like, how about something, so let's copy that image and we'll paste that in. Okay, now this does not look like it's seamless, so when I place that next to it, you get that line running right up the middle of it. So in order to create a texture that is a little more seamless, I can either hit Control T or Command T if you're on the Mac, and then right click and hit flip horizontal, and you'll get the perfect matchup in the middle. But a lot of times you'll get this kind of butterfly effect that's going on here, where you get kind of a weird, you can almost see exactly where it mirrored across, because you're getting the same stone back and forth. So a good way to kind of remedy that is to mirror it and then pull it over the top of the other one. Now right now you're going to see that line, but we're going to get rid of that line by grabbing our eraser tool. And basically this is a little bit different of a brush. You can get, if you like this brush, you can just basically, I believe, one of the natural brushes options here, and I got to this by going to this little arrow off to the side here, and you can load other brush types. So I have my natural brush here, and I'm gonna get, it's a fairly decent size, but I've taken the opacity here is down around 10%, and then I'm just going to start kind of clicking, and as I click, it's going to start to fade, and the other one, and as that large the bit, getting some of that, I can over. That way it eliminates that butterfly effect, and then start to kind of get rid of a little bit more of this. So then I'm getting what looks to be like one stone there, and this one kind of weaves into the other one, and maybe that one weaves together a little more. Overall, starting to look, so it's not really defined line. And if I'm going to hit those two, and I bring this up. Now that doesn't look too bad in terms of getting a line across there, just because the stone is stacked horizontally. So I'm going to be that looks fairly okay there. So I'm going to let that one go. But if I were to get another harsh line there, I could do the same thing vertically. I could pull this down and start to fade in the other ones. And, you know, if you don't like a certain, you know, how that's lining up, maybe you pull this down a little bit and you eliminate that top row, but because this one works a little bit better. Whatever works for you. So I'm going to grab all of these and I'll merge these together too. Okay, so I've got like two different stone textures here, and I'm going to zoom in on, let's say we're going to do this little gable opening here, or gable entrance. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to size it down to about about the right scale for the stone. So somewhere probably right around in there. Okay, so that looks about right. And now what I like to do is I will drag this to kind of the back of my layers, and then I'm going to duplicate it quite a few times. And then I'm going to turn all of those off except for the one I'm working with. And I can pull that back up to the front. The reason for that is I always want to have a backup copy of this. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to distort this, and I'm going to, you know, cut pieces out of it and all of that. And I always want to have this perfect kind of square rectangle shape and my original texture and that sort of thing, so that when I do, say, you know, if I was doing this entire thing, I would do this face, and then I need this rectangle again of this texture to move on to the next face. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to copy this over. Now I'm getting some of the butterflying effect again. I'm going to copy that over, move that over a little, and that starts to get rid of it. You're seeing this same stone over and over again, tiling, and that may become an issue. So if for whatever reason that becomes a problem, if you have one, usually, and stone is probably the worst, if you have a stone that's a single color that calls itself out from the rest, you're gonna see that way more than the rest. So similarly, this stone right here, you're seeing that over and over again. These darker ones are probably going to be the same, whereas all of the kind of gray stones don't tend to call them so much. So this, and I grab a little here, and layer vehicle, pull it for the top of one of these. I'll do the middle one, and I'm just going to do the exact same thing that we did before. I'm just going to feather it in so that, whoop, not what I meant to do. And it's a good sign when you can't really tell where exactly your layer is. There it is. Okay. something similar to that. Okay, so it looks a little goofy, but from the distance that we're going to be looking at this thing, that's not going to be a big deal. So I can take all these, and I'm going to merge those layers together. And I'm going to copy this up. And I'm going to copy it one more time to get this last little bit here. And because this last little bit is all the way over here, I'm going to kind of jog this over a little so I don't get this stacking effect where I have some of the rock stack, and you can start to play with that a little bit too if you're getting too much of one rock stacking vertically. You can start to play with jockeying them back and forth. So those layers. Okay, now I'm going to turn that off real quick. I'm going to go back to my background layer, which is the line work, and I'm going to hit my magic wand. Okay, so I have a tolerance set for 30, depending on your line work and that sort of stuff. Depending on what you're selecting, you may go a little lower than that, you may go a little higher, but I want to make sure that this continuous is selected. So I'm going to select continuous, and then I'm going to click the area that I want stone to be in. So I've got my stone area selected here. Now if I go back, I'm going to turn my stone layer back on, and I'm going to go back to that stone layer. If I invert my selection, so Control Shift I, and then hit delete, I get exactly where the stone's going to be. Now this is something for stone and sometimes a decent amount of exterior work. I'm going to undo that. I will select my area, so I'll get this nice clean line there, but it chops my corner off really harshly. It gives me a really kind of truncated edge there, and no stone wall is going to be like that. So I'll take my polygon lasso up here, and I might come in here, and I might go stone by stone and give a little bit of texture to that edge all the way up. And just kind of make it up as you go along. If there's a joint that's right along there, just follow the joint. But otherwise, it's just kind of up to you to feather the edge as much as you really want to feather it. You're not going to notice a ton, but it's just another layer of detail that helps your image. So I'll go there, and then come all the way back down. Make sure I got that. Whoops. Okay. So what happened there was I inverted my selection, and then I just erased what I wanted to select. So let's do this real quick. I'm going to make this a little shoddy, but you'll get the idea. Okay, so I come all the way back up, finish that off. Now if I hit delete, so now I get a little bit more of a sort of feathered edge there, and then when I do the one going back, I'll keep this texture in front of that. Now if I were to have my Revit model and I'm applying a texture here, as I mentioned before, some stuff I render as a pure matte white. And the reason for that is I can come in and layer a texture over like this and throw that on a multiply layer, and then I'll get all of the perfect shadows coming through. I don't believe I have a something quite like that for this file, but in other files I definitely do. So that'll be something that we'll get into a little bit later on. So in terms of applying textures, pretty simple. makes it real easy when your line work is around entirely, and you can just magic wand it and go from there. Windows and stuff like that, if I have the opportunity, I'll go and I'll take pictures of the windows and then also the stuff across, say, across the street from the windows, so that I can Photoshop in a reflection. I'll just put a big huge swatch of pictures all the way across the entire thing, select all my windows, invert the selection and delete them, and then I'll take the opacity down on whatever those images are, so then you just get a real faint reflection to them. And occasionally I'll go in and I'll add a Gaussian blur to it as well, so it's not a perfectly crisp image. Another thing that you'll probably want to add are shadows, and so we'll come in here, and so we've got a decent kind of chunk here, and these are, I believe, 2 foot deep overhangs to this, so they're going to have a decent shadow line. And don't make, if I'm centering stuff across this, the odds that your shadow is perfectly symmetrical is not great, so I'm going to make it a little off, and whoops. So I'm going to come up here, I'm going to come down, and with this casting a shadow, I'm going to have something that looks a little like this. Okay. And I'm going to come up and grab this entire box there. So I've got that one, and then I'm going to also grab this little section here and right here under the windowsill. And you want to stay consistent with your direction of shadow. So I'm going to grab a little bit of that and go on the side there. Okay, so now that I've got that on there, and you'll have all of your shadows in there from your Revit model, so you won't have to do this unless you're just doing something similar to our High Street option or project, where you're going to be applying your own textures and shadows and stuff like that. So I hit Control-Shift-N to create a new layer, and then I put my color all the way on as black as I can get it, and I hit Edit and Fill. I'm going to fill that so that I get this little shadow effect, and then I'm going to pull the opacity on those down a little bit so that maybe a little more. Okay, something around in there. So now I'm starting to get a shadow underneath here, a shadow for this, but shadow lines aren't perfectly straight like that. They have a fuzz. So I'm going to blur to that. That's probably much. Let's pull back a little. Like that's not too bad. So as you can see in the preview here, it's making this a little fuzzier, but it softens it up and helps with the depth, provides some depth to the whole thing. So hit OK, and now I've got my nice shadow on my wall and stuff like that. So I'm not even going to use this texture, so I'm going to get rid of that. Alright, now trees. There's a few ways you can go about doing this. I'm going to open the texture. Okay, so I have a whole bunch of trees in my library, and so things like, so all these are various trees. If you can create TIFF files. So let's say let's grab this one. So basically what a TIFF file allows you to do is, I have this saved and it has this black background, but I can go over here and I have it saved where I have this alpha channel. and I'm going to click the alpha channel, and it turns everything that's a part of that tree white. And then I can come down here and hit this this little option. It says load channel as selection, and it's going to select everything about that tree. And then when I go back to my normal mode, I can grab that tree and pull it over, and now I have a perfect tree. And so I can have all of my trees and shrubs and all that stuff. Those can be saved into my library, and then whenever I need them, it's just that simple to grab a tree and pull it in. So that can be really handy. So when you're building up your library of stuff, creating TIFF files of it can be really handy for later on, so you don't have to come in and try to edit out the background. So a strategy that is also not too bad. So if we search for something with a white background, so let's say tree white background. So these are going to have, a lot of these are going to have watermarks on them because they're licensed things. Let's try something like, that's not a very good quality one. Neither is that. That's a pretty good one. So let's grab that one. Let's copy that one, paste that one in. Okay. So we've got our tree here. A good way to isolate this from the background is to take your magic wand, and I'm going to go with a tolerance of, say, 20. And what that's going to do is the tolerance, it's going to get rid of kind of this fuzziness around everything there. And that'll help make the image a little bit cleaner. Now, I'm going to turn continuous off for this. And the reason for that is if I were to have continuous on and I select, I get this nice outline of the tree, but I don't get any of the white spots in here. And it would be a nightmare for me to come in and try to click all of those little white spots and get rid of them. I'm looking at this, and I may want to increase my tolerance just a tad so that I can get into all of these little spots here. So let's increase this to, say, 30. And I'll go there. It's still not grabbing everything, but let's see if turning continuous off helps. So we'll turn continuous off, and now I'm going to select. And so now you can see it's grabbing all of the little white spots throughout the entire image. So I can then come in and hit delete, and it'll get rid of all of the white that was a part of the background. And so now I have this tree isolated from the background, and I have it to work with and place wherever I want. So that's a handy little tool to get your get some of the items that you're going to want probably off of the background. It's also really nice for if you're photoshopping people. So if you take pictures of people and you want to isolate them from the background, sometimes that can help depending on what the background is. If your background's a little crazy, that's obviously not going to work real well. Always try to get it with a little bit cleaner of a background. The cleaner the background, the easier it's going to be to isolate the piece you want from the background. So in a nutshell, that's kind of a brief little summary of some of the stuff we went over in class and lecture. If you have any questions while you're working on your high street projects, just shoot me an email.